It's not on the schedule yet. It needs to be, I know.
They can put them in that window.
Okay, everybody, it's 2 o'clock. I'm going to say good afternoon and welcome to the meeting of the Audit Committee. The first item on the agenda is the election of chairman. Can I have any nominations, please?
Can I nominate Philip White?
Seconded. Are there any other nominations, please? No. Okay, can we have a vote, please, for Mr. White? Fabulous, that's carried. So everybody's in agreement. So would you like to come and take the chair, please? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think maybe we'll just deal with a couple of formal items to begin with. We need to appoint a vice chair. Have we got any nominations for the vice chair?
Jim Higginson.
Any seconds? Thank you. In favour? I think that's carried. Okay, thank you. Formally to appoint, note the appointment of lay member, well that's me. People who have been involved in this committee in the past will know that I've chaired the committee in past years. Apologies for absence.
There's been no apologies for absence received.
Councillor Val Smith. She's away, and I believe who was Laura Jones, that's right, I couldn't think who it was now. She's got an appointment in Cardiff that she couldn't get out of a short notice.
Well, okay, I'd like to welcome all the members of this newly constituted Audit Committee, whether continuing with their involvement from previous years or people who are new to the committee. I feel strongly that the committee belongs to its members and its effectiveness is ensured by the commitment which members always give to carrying out the work of the committee. As a lay member who's been elected to take on the role of the chair, I will continue to chair the committee in a relatively informal way according to precedents already set. The one formality I will insist on is that if members wish to raise new business, it should be in the form of a motion on notice as described in Rule 11 of the Rules of Procedure of the Council. It would be helpful if in such circumstances members wishing to bring such a motion would provide an appropriate briefing paper so that committee members can consider the issues involved. For all papers submitted to the Audit Committee, I will ask the authors to provide an introduction to the issues which are covered by the paper. And if a paper is presented to the committee which doesn't originate from the council, for example from the Welsh Audit Office, I will invite Monmouthshire County Council officers to provide a response in the first instance before inviting questions and observations from committee members. Yes, do I have a question? No? Okay. So that about sums it up. So I'll just move on to apologies for absence. Oh, we've done that, haven't we? Sorry. Now, I know we've got some presentations on the workings of the committee. It's not on the agenda, but I think this is an appropriate point to go into that.
Okay, thanks, Chairman. My name is Andrew Wathen. I'm the Chief Internal Auditor here at Monmouthshire. So welcome to everybody, welcome to new members. As this is the first official Audit Committee meeting, we thought it'd be beneficial just to give you a brief overview of what internal audit is about, what the Audit Committee is about, and then my colleague from External Audit, Terry Lewis, who works for WAO, we'll give an overview of from an external perspective as well. Okay. As the chair said, it is quite an informal situation, so if you've got any questions, by all means shout out as we go through, and if you have any questions at the end, then by all means just ask. All right. Okay, good start. It's not working. Right. Just give me a sec. Right, I don't know why that's not working. It's showing on my screen, but not anybody else's.
Otherwise, I don't know whether. I don't know.
It's changing.
There you go. There we are. Yeah.
Is that changed?
Yeah. Gone off the wrong slide, isn't it?
Right, sorry man, just be with us a sec.
Working perfectly well this morning.
Yeah. No glitches. Resume. Okay, right, apologies for this. What I'll do is I'll run through the presentation and make the slides available for everybody at the end. So apologies.
I can send them to everybody who's got the.
If you email it now, we've all
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
a machines we can forward.
Great, yeah, thanks. Right, yeah, great. I'll make a start then. Okay, so very briefly as an overview, what I'm going to talk about is the role of the Audit Committee, the role of internal audit, and how internal audit will support the Audit Committee in carrying out its functions. So, in terms of the role of the Audit Committee, the Audit Committee is a statutory requirement that every council in Wales needs to have an Audit Committee. And it's set up to review and scrutinise the authority's financial affairs, to make reports and recommendations in relation to the authority's financial affairs, to review and assess the risk management, the internal control processes and corporate governance arrangements of the authority, to make reports and recommendations to the authority on the adequacy and effectiveness of those arrangements, to oversee the authority's internal and external audit arrangements, to review the financial statements, so that's year-end annual financial statements prepared by the authority, and to demonstrate sound corporate governance. And that's written down in the authority's constitution and agreed from the local government measure. And in terms of the Audit Committee, and membership, obviously not all members can come onto Audit Committee, but at least 2/3 of members must be councillors, so elected members to the authority. At least one member must be a layperson, as the chair introduced himself earlier. He is the layperson of the Audit Committee. No more than one of the members is a member of the authority's executive. So we've got one cabinet member with us this afternoon, who's Phil, but we can't have any more. And the senior member of the executive cannot be a member of the Audit Committee. In terms of the role of the internal audit, and that's where I come in. I've got a team who are based at Mega, and we cover all services provided by the authority. And we provide an internal audit service on behalf of Joy, who's the Section 151 officer and head of finance. And there's a statutory obligation to provide internal audit within local government organisations. We're concerned about the internal control environment, which basically means the processes that we've got in place to ensure efficient, effective and economic use of public funds. We look into probity, fraud and value for money. So when things don't go so well, the auditors go in and we may review processes to either determine misconduct or inappropriate process, or to get things back on track to demonstrate value for money moving forward. We have financial regulations within the organisation to ensure sound financial management across all service areas, and my team makes sure that there's compliance with those in service delivery. We also have contract procedure rules in terms of procurement, how we engage with contractors, third-party suppliers for goods and services, and we make sure there's compliance with that across the board as well and within service area. This is a continuous and independent audit. We are employed by Monmouthshire, we work for Monmouthshire Council, but we are independent. We are totally independent from any other operation within the authority, and although I report directly to Joy as head of finance, if I feel that there are any services that Joy is responsible for which aren't working as well as they should be, then I can report back into Audit Committee in terms of an opinion, and I report in my own name. So that in terms of objectivity and independence, we can clearly demonstrate that, and that's really key in terms of the way internal audit works. We cover our work on a risk-based approach, so as much as we'd like to do everything and cover all services, we can't. We've got limited resources, so we assess what work we need to do on an annual basis, and we build that into an audit plan, which comes to Audit Committee for approval. Where we have implementations of new systems, their managers should be consulting us to make sure that there are appropriate controls in place. Mentioned the annual plan. I also provide an annual report to Audit Committee based on the work we've undertaken in the financial year, and I've got an obligation to provide an overall audit opinion and give you, as members of the Audit Committee, assurance that the internal control environment is sound, we've got appropriate risk management processes in place, and the governance is good. And I do that in my overall opinion, and that's kind of developed from all the individual jobs which we undertake throughout the year. In terms of independence as well, if required, I can report directly to the chair of the Audit Committee, the chief exec, or the leader of the council. I don't have to follow protocol in terms of hierarchy if the need arises. Reassuringly, that has never happened since I've been working with Monmouthshire, so that generally means processes are reasonably well managed. So we provide an objective assurance to management and the Audit Committee. We demonstrate best practice and promote best practice, and we review and appraise on the adequacy of internal controls. We're looking to safeguard the assets of the authority and protect the interests of the individuals.
Sorry.
Right. Take it away, I can't speak. All right. Don't worry. For the time being. No yet. Just give me a second, I'll do the techie bit in a minute. Sorry. Right, so apologies for that.
We've got it that one here anyway.
Have you all got access to it now? Mostly? Yeah.
You've got the slides been set. I haven't looked at them, but they haven't set.
Okay. Okay. So we're on slide.
You're on the roll of internal audit.
Yeah, roles. Thanks. Thanks. Slide 7. Talked about the adequacy of internal controls, safeguarding assets and the individuals. At the end of the day, we're trying to protect public money. We make sure public money is used appropriately, effectively, efficiently and economically. And we make sure there's value for money in terms of service provision and the way operational managers deal with the finances that they're responsible for. We make sure that there's suitability and reliability of financial information. We do have access to all personnel, documents, records and premises across the board if we need to, investigate. And the last point on the slide is we do get involved with special investigations from time to time, which could come as a result of us doing regularity audit work, or allegations from individuals, or sometimes anonymous allegations that things are not as good as they should be in service provision, or if there's an allegation of misuse of public money. We get involved in the investigation, and our remit then is to refute or substantiate the allegation based on the evidence that's available. So we produce a report and we take it from there. So as an internal audit team, we need to make sure we're compliant with the public sector internal audit standards. They came into being 1st of April 2013, and they're effective for all internal audit teams across the UK. So local government, private firms, etc., all have to comply with international standards, which public sector internal audit standards are based on. They stem from the Institute of Internal Audit across the UK, and they replaced the previous SIPFA code of practice, which we've had in place for a number of years. What they're trying to ensure is that every internal audit team is professional, maintains its independence, provides an objective opinion, and is a key element of corporate governance. So we've got an internal audit charter which came through Audit Committee for approval, and included in that is the mission to enhance and protect organisational value by providing risk-based and objective assurance, advice and insight. So overall, as an internal audit team, that's what we're about. In terms of definition, you've all got the slides in front of you now, so there's no point in me asking you this question. But we are an independent, objective assurance and consulting activity designed to add value to an organisation. Helps the organisation accomplish its objectives by working in a systematic, disciplined way to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of risk management, internal control and governance processes. Right. Take 2.
Andrew, while the lady's doing that, could you explain to the new members what a Section 151 officer's duties are?
I could, Jim, but do you want to explain that as your Section 151 officer, please?
I'm just trying to bring up the slide I went through this morning. I did an introduction to local government finance this morning, and it was covered on one of the slides there. But essentially, authorities are required to put in place appropriate and proper financial administration, and I have the statutory role to ensure that's in place, and it includes putting in proper financial procedures and governance arrangements over the finances of the authority, and ensuring that I have an internal audit section that's properly resourced to check that those controls and systems are working properly as well, in a nutshell.
Thanks. It's okay, Jim. Right, sorry, back on track now. Got a few technical issues. So as an internal audit team, we work with core principles, which are set out in the standards, where we need to demonstrate integrity, competence, that we're able to do our jobs properly and professionally, that we work in an objective fashion and are free from undue influence, as I mentioned earlier on. It's important that I maintain independence and my team maintains independence. We try and make sure that the objectives of the organisation are met in the work that we need to take. We're appropriately positioned and adequately resourced within the authority. We demonstrate quality and continuous improvement in the work which we undertake and the reports we pull together. We communicate effectively and promptly to operational managers. We provide risk-based assurance. We're insightful, proactive and future-focused. Is our intention and promote organisational improvement. So when we do our reports, we identify strengths and weaknesses within those reports. So we think we're given a balanced perspective of the area which we're auditing. And based on those weaknesses, that determines the audit opinion which we give at the end of that particular job. What we're doing is trying to give an opinion on the assurance level in that particular area. So at the moment we have a considerable assurance, substantial assurance, reasonable assurance and limited assurance. And limited assurance means that the controls aren't as good as they should be and management need to take immediate action to address those concerns to improve their service provision and compliance with sound financial management. And in terms of another item in the standards is the Code of Ethics, and that talks about integrity, objectivity, confidentiality and competence in which we undertake our business. The slide that I'm referring to next is the slide with the Audit Committee in the centre, with lots of circles going around the side. That's how the internal audit team will interact with the Audit Committee and support the Audit Committee in undertaking its functions. I mentioned most of these already, but I do an annual report and an annual plan in my name based on a financial year. I'll be reporting on a quarterly basis the work that we've undertaken and the respective audit opinions, plus the performance of the team. So I'm ultimately accountable to you as the Audit Committee for providing you assurance. And if you're not happy, you can challenge both on the work that I undertake and the performance of the team. We do a 6-monthly update on unfavourable audit opinions. So we're asking members of the Audit Committee to challenge operational managers if there's a need and may call them into account to ask them why they haven't addressed agreed recommendations to improve their service provision. There are the 2 reports I'll be bringing later to Audit Committee, which will be examples of that. The plan is based on a risk assessment of all work that we could possibly undertake, and we take into consideration the comments and views, priorities of heads of service in service areas, and then external audit will feed into the Audit Committee as well and support you where they can. So apologies for the technical issues. That was very much a whistle-stop tour of what Audit Committee is about, what internal audit is about. Happy to take any questions.
Right. Well, that was Mr. Wathen, who is head of internal audit. Your chief internal auditor, is that your official title?
That's right, Chairman. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And we've also got the chief finance officer here at the top. Yes. Has anyone got any questions or observations for Mr. Wathen? Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. I think that was very useful. Apologies to anyone who's trying to follow this on the live stream, because I expect they're just getting the vocal at the moment. And let's hope we can get back to normal service as soon as possible. But I think we're back, right?
Do it again, Andy.
So I understand we've got another presentation, is that right, from Mr. Lewis from the Welsh Audit Office? Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll hand over to you then.
waiting to see if it comes up on the screen. Shall I carry on because you've got it anyway? Okay, well, good afternoon everyone. My name's Terry Lewis. I'm an audit manager with the Wales Audit Office. I'll just give you, similar to Andrew, a quick whistle-stop tour of the role of the Wales Audit Office and how we interact with the Audit Committee. If you refer to slide 2, it just explains that we're the external auditor of Monmouthshire County Council. What I'll say, just cover is who we are, what we do, comparison with internal audit because there is a distinct difference, and mention a little bit about the good practice exchange. On slide number 3 then, the Auditor General for Wales, Hugh Vaughan-Thomas, he's supported by the Wales Audit Office, which is the staff, buildings, etc. He's totally independent of the National Assembly for Wales. He is accountable to the Public Accounts Committee, and his powers really arise from the Government of Wales Act 2006. On the next slide then, in terms of who are we, the Wales Audit Office itself was created on the 1st of April 2005. It was a merger between the National Audit Office, as was at that point, and the Audit Commission in Wales. The Audit Commission was previously England and Wales. It broke off and became just Wales, and then it merged with the Welsh bit of the National Audit Office to form the Wales Audit Office. In total, we've got 250 staff at offices throughout Wales. We've got offices at many sort of sites where we conduct audits, but the main headquarters is in Cardiff. We also got an office in West Wales and North Wales as well. We don't just cover local government, we do a wide public sector sort of audit, local authorities, we audit the Welsh Government itself, the Welsh Government sponsored bodies, the bodies that they provide money to spend on their behalf, police and fire authorities, all the National Health Service, health boards, NHS trusts, national parks. So quite a big range of portfolio there in terms of the audits that we cover. On slide number 5 then, our work, there are 3 sort of elements there that are summarised on that slide. Financial audit, we audit the accounts of the authority each financial year. We audit grant claims and certify those on behalf of the authority. Performance audit, we carry out improvement audit, and we carry out studies across all of Wales as well. Other areas of work, we've got an investigative studies team. We deal with a large volume of correspondence that comes in from all different sources. We sort of issue public interest reports on areas where we feel that's appropriate. And we also maintain something called the Good Practice Exchange, which I'll pick up later as well. On slide number 6 then, it just says a little bit of detail about who we are in terms of the audit team. Obviously sitting at the top is the Auditor General, Hugh Thomas. Engagement lead is Anne-Marie Harkin. I'm the Financial Audit Manager. My opposite number is Non Jenkins, who will be coming to future meetings where we've got sort of performance audit reports to present. Similarly, David Wilson is a Performance Audit Assessment Lead, so you'll be seeing him on occasion as well. Slide number 7 then, in terms of what we do, we audit the financial statements. We make sure the accounts are prepared in accordance with the relevant accounting standards, the international ISAs they're called, which are the international accounting requirements. Those are what we audit to, and our audit is structured around that. We adopt the concept of materiality, so we're not sort of auditing every last figure in the accounts, but there will be a materiality figure that we would qualify the accounts if they were out by that amount. Items below that we would probably report. But if you refer to our sort of audit plan, it'll explain that in a bit more detail. But we're not auditing every single figure in the accounts, basically. We're given an overall view about whether those are inaccurate. Those accounts present a true and fair view of the financial position. And they've been properly prepared as well in accordance with all the various regulations. We also audit the annual governance statement, which is presented with the accounts, and make sure that's been prepared in accordance with the various guidance and is consistent with our knowledge of the audit, because we will do financial audit work during the course of the year, and all our performance work that we do, we will attend committees. We build up a lot of intelligence during the course of an audit, which we will then review as part of the sort of governance statement to make sure that that's an accurate reflection of the position. In terms then of grant claim certification, annually the council will submit claims for grants, money, reclaiming money that it has spent in accordance with grant conditions. We will then determine if those claims have been fairly stated and we report any sort of discrepancies. And they also, the money's been spent in accordance with the terms and conditions that on, you know, that those grants were awarded on. Last year we audited, I think it was 12 claims with a total value of £84 million. So that gives you a sort of an idea of the scale of the audit there. On slide number 8, in terms of performance audit, just an overview of what they do is an improvement assessment, which is annual assessments of the council's arrangements to secure continuous improvement. And it will review the council's improvement report. They will conduct all Wales thematic and local-based performance audits to review performance and track improvement over time. Provide feedback, provide presentations and local reports, which will outline sort of key findings and recommendations, and we can make proposals for improvement, which the council has to act on as well. We certify the improvement plan and the annual performance report. We published our own annual improvement report for each council, and we also publish national reports on local government and wider public sector issues as necessary. On slide number 9, I'm just sort of going to mention something about the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, because there is a responsibility on the Auditor General really to carry out examinations of public bodies to assess the extent to which they've acted in accordance with the sustainable development principles as set out in the Act. We must carry out an examination at least once in every 5-year period, and we must report the results of any examinations to the National Assembly. So that's an important new aspect to the performance audit that's relatively new, as I'm sure you're aware. Slide number 10 just contrasts the sort of external and internal audit. Internal audit, as Andrew's already explained, reports internally to the council's accounting officer. Their work programme is determined by management and approved by the Audit Committee, and they focus their work on areas of risk, the risks that they've identified for the actual body. Whereas external audit, the scope of our work is usually within sort of legislation or at auditor's discretion for value for money work. We are the statutory auditors. Our work programme is determined by the Wales Audit Office based on risks to the audit opinion on the accounts and specific areas where we feel there are risks, where we may feel it appropriate to undertake a particular study. So we've got a lot more discretion. We're independent of the council itself. But having said that, we must ensure that there's good communication and sharing of knowledge with internal audits. So we'll be aware of what they're doing, they'll be aware of what we're doing, we will take account of it. We can place reliance on internal audit work where we feel it's necessary on grant claims and accounts and in areas of performance. But obviously we can't sort of direct internal audit to do something on our behalf. They've got, their role is totally different to ours. But as I say, we will take account of what they've done and build that into our work. Where we seek to place reliance on internal audit, there is a requirement on us as part of the auditing standards to re-perform an element of that to make sure that it's satisfactory. If internal audits say, yes, we've done X, Y, Z, we just don't take that at face value. We will do a little bit of testing around that to make sure that it is actually the case as a general issue in relation to that. Slide number 11 then. We've produced our sort of annual audit plan back in March, and it sets out the work that we propose to do on financial audit, relatively stable in terms of the work that we do. We do work on the financial statements and grant claims. On performance audit, there's the annual improvement audit and assessment. There's the Wellbeing of Future Generations baseline assessment. There are local themed reviews. There's local risk-based work that we discuss and agree with the council annually, and there's 3 all Wales sort of local government studies which are set out in the plan. On slide number 12, then, just good practice exchange. There's an obligation on the Auditor General to help public services improve by sharing knowledge and practices that work from elsewhere. So we're committed really to improving public services across Wales by identifying and sharing good practice. We run various events on online webinars where stakeholders can exchange knowledge and share resources online. This is just on financial management, public sector, governance, etc. All outputs and case studies are sort of available free via our website. So You know, if you need to know more about good practice and what works elsewhere, there's a lot of resource there that can be referred to, and it's available for free. Concluding slide number 13, that just sort of says who I am. Lon Jenkins, Performance Audit Manager, with probably the two key people that will be attending the Audit Committee. Contact details are there, and there's a reference to the website. And that's broadly it. I'm happy to take any questions that anyone might have on any aspect of external audit.
So over to you if anyone wants to ask any questions or make any points. Yes, Councillor Murphy.
Just to try and help out a little bit, Chair. What I did this morning, use this one so I can look at you. There's an awful lot of stuff there which won't mean very much at the moment. This, unlike a lot of the scrutiny committees, because this is not, although we can scrutinise, we're not a scrutiny committee. There's an awful lot of stuff. If it's June, it must be this report. And so there's a structure to this, and once you get into it, you'll understand a lot more about what goes on. But around that, things like the unsatisfactory audit reports that Andrew brings forward, things like that, we can pick that up and get groups together who will look into that, or get the senior officers in. But there's an awful lot of dry stuff there that you'll just learn to live with, basically.
And thank you, Councillor. Well, again, I think useful information. So thanks very much to Mr. Lewis from the Welsh Audit Office. And just to remind ourselves, there is a standing invitation for the Welsh Audit Office to attend this committee, and they usually do. Okay, the next formal item of business is declarations of interest. Now, if anyone wants to make such a declaration, depending on what's on the agenda, you can do so now, but I'm quite happy to take declarations as we go through the business, when people might say, oh, well, yes, I am involved in this, I'm a governor or something like that.
Just
yes,
on that
Councillor
one,
Higginson.
Chairman, if I may, there are issues on the agenda concerning schools. There's a general dispensation on that. You know, we probably all members of governing bodies here, there and wherever, but there's a general dispensation that you don't need to declare an interest in if a school is mentioned on the report.
Well, that's a helpful intervention, and unless I'm advised otherwise, we'll proceed on that basis. The next item on the agenda is public open forum. There are no members of the public present so far as I can see, so I'll move on. I now see what's happened is that the introductions to the Audit Committee were put in as agenda item 7. I've read an earlier draft of this, I think, and I might not have been aware that that had been actually inserted in there, so apologies for that. I was just working from the way I'd briefed myself previously. Next item on the agenda is to confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting held on 16th of March 2017. Now, I know that the constitution of the committee has changed somewhat since then, but if anybody who was present at the previous meeting wishes to make any comments on the minutes, I'm happy to take them now. Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Chair. The minutes are accurate as far as I can see.
Yeah, I second that.
So if we can take that as read. Right. So we now move on to an item on the agenda which I always find very useful, which is the action list from the previous meeting. Now, again, I know that not everyone present here was in on the discussion before, but the items that we have is the committee wanted a report about the youth service, detailing the zone and the grant funding element of the whole directorate review. The last I heard on this, that this was work in progress that was going to come up. The report would be available sometime in the next financial year, which of course has now just started. I don't think is there anything to add to that at the moment? Yes, Councillor Easton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's agenda item 4 you're talking about on the action list, is it? Well, I brought this to the last meeting, or maybe the meeting before, I'm not quite sure, regarding the zone in Caldecott. I am aware that there is a business plan sort of in place, and I think it'll be put to the full council sometime in September, because they wait for the new council to come in. But I thought it would be appropriate to have some sort of direction from Ms Byrne at this moment in time for this meeting, because we're talking about the £70,000 grant to Welsh Government. We're not quite sure where it really belongs, where it sits, and of course we're concerned about the fact that the building in Caldecott would not remain there. I thought it would be inappropriate to have an interim briefing at least before the business plan was put forward. So I think that'll become to the council after the August recess.
I think Councillor Murphy wanted to make a comment.
Yes, Chair. I think we could do with that information in a timely manner. With respect, we're not going to get it out of Kelly Byrne. Not only is she so heavily involved in City Deal, but with the fact that the Chief Exec is now laid up and can hardly move, she's also taken over his role at the moment. So if we want that, we need to channel it towards an officer who could, in view of the time it's about, could possibly circulate a report. Somebody in the youth service. The trouble is they're all seconded to something else. Tracy Thomas is up to her neck in the alternative delivery model. I don't know, perhaps Joy or Wendy could give some thought to whoever we can ask for it.
I'm sure we'll find the relevant officer to bring some information through to committee. Perhaps it's best just to email that information out, given that it was asked for last time, and we'll try and get an email out to members.
Okay, so we're leaving that with you then.
Chair, Councillor Murphy did mention, Section 151 officer did mention the alternative delivery model, and yes, that is what this is part of. It is part of the process.
Right. Okay, well, thank you. Next item on the agenda describes the 0 hours contracts. Historic information provided to committee. I understand this was circulated to committee members on the 10th of April. That was about redundancies in schools, I think. Yeah. The next one, 0 hours contracts, it was down to me to provide a briefing paper for the new committee to provide feedback to the full council. That's on the agenda now, I think. Next one about risks. Mr. Wathen, Chief Internal Auditor, to provide outcomes of follow-up reviews for internal audit. Have you got anything to add to that? This says you're going to do it in September.
Yes, Chairman, I think we agreed last time that we would do a follow-up of the events audit that we did, which had an unfavourable audit opinion. We're in progress with that at the moment, and we'll report back to Audit Committee in September.
Thank you.
Chair, if I could just interject there, we've got an awful lot of events coming up now over the summer, Little Mix, Rusty Shackle, you name it, they're all coming. I just wondered what measures have been put in place to try and ensure that we don't get unsatisfactory audit opinions out of that.
Do you have any information about that?
Okay, thanks, Chairman. We're working through that at the moment. Initially, we felt it was it had limited assurance, and we brought that to the attention of Audit Committee. That's been reported back to the operational manager. The operational manager is working through some of those actions. The situation has improved a little bit, but we haven't finalised that report at the moment. We're still working with the operational manager to try and get some information back to make sure everything is on track before the summer events.
Thank you. Next item was about the policy on fraud, bribery and corruption, that the employee code of conduct was going to be made available to the committee. I haven't seen it. Has it been made available?
Jim, I think given that we've got a new set of members for Audit Committee, I'm happy to redistribute that to all new members.
If you could include me as well on the distribution. And finally, Cardiff Capital Region City deal charges. I think the concern here was whether there might be any charges to Monmouthshire County Council arising from the Capital Region City deal. Don't know, do you have anything on this, Mr. Lewis?
Yeah, I think I did send something round confirming that there would be no implications. The city deal would be audited centrally as part of a separate team of the Wales Audit Office. And going forward, I think that it's still evolving on how that's going to work, but that would happen sort of centrally. Whether at some point there would be some sort of recharge then out to the constituent bodies at some point in the future, I don't know, but certainly there'd be nothing in this current year for doing that audit.
I would suspect, Chair, that there shouldn't be. It's got its own cabinet, its own structure, and I would have thought that it should stand on its own.
Okay, well, I think that's clear then. So thank you for that. I'll move on to the next item on the agenda then, which is the Audit Committee Annual Report 2016-17. This may be helpful to new members of the Audit Committee as it provides an overview of last year's work of the committee. I've prepared the draft in consultation with the Chief Internal Auditor, but if Mr. Wathen wishes to make any observations on the report now, he's welcome to do so.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I think it fairly reflects the work that the Audit Committee did in 16-17. I think members will appreciate that quite a lot of work was done in terms of challenge and process, and holding certain officers to account, but also getting the assurance that generally things were working well within Monmouthshire.
So questions and observations from the floor, if any, please. In that case, I suggest that
for my part, it's a fully comprehensive report, and I'm prepared to accept the recommendations. It's very extensive, and I read it, and it's good.
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you. In that case, I will ask the clerk to the committee to submit the paper to the full council and let me know when it's on, so I can attend. And perhaps you could do any tweaking needs to be done to get it into the right form, but I don't think we're far away. Next agenda item, implementation of internal audit recommendations from 2015 and 16. Over to Mr. Wathen, please, to introduce this.
Thank you, Chairman. This is one of the regular reports we will be bringing to Audit Committee. The nature of this report is that this is the first time we've brought this information in this format to Audit Committee, and it's based on the work that we've undertaken in 14-15. I mentioned previously that we've got an audit plan and we do a number of audit jobs. Within the audit jobs, if we've identified any weaknesses, we would include an audit recommendation to improve the control environment of the service provision at that time. Generally, managers agree with that, and then the trick is to make sure they actually implement those recommendations, so the next time we come back, we can see there's been an improvement. We've referred to unfavourable audit opinions already this afternoon, but this relates to all recommendations for all reports we've issued in 14-15 and 15-16. So if members have any concerns about non-implementation of recommendations, then we have an opportunity to call in operational managers and challenge them as to why various recommendations have not been implemented. So that's a bit of background of where we are with this report. As I mentioned earlier, our reports are based on strengths and weaknesses, so it's a balanced review. We determine whether the weakness we've identified is a significant, moderate, or other not less significant weakness, which determines the overall opinion. For 14-15, 96% of our audit recommendations were actually agreed by operational managers, which is very reassuring. In 15-16, 97% was agreed. What we've had to do to make sure that those recommendations have been implemented is undertake further work. So when we have an unfavourable audit opinion, we've given assurance to the Audit Committee that we will go back as an audit team to review and to audit that particular service area and provide an updated audit opinion. But that is for unfavourable audit opinions. For all opinions, we haven't got the physical resources to do that, so we do that on a sample basis. We go out and we will check and verify to make sure recommendations have been implemented. But to a large extent, we have to rely on operational managers providing us with that information, providing us with the action plan to say that yes, they have implemented the agreed recommendations, and this report provides that information. So, apologies from me to start with. Since the report was published, we've checked the figures, and unfortunately there's been a bit of an error in the calculation. So if I could just point that out to members to start with, where we've mentioned car park income in the appendix, it kind of probably jumps out to people as a bit of an oddity. It was 22 recommendations with 18 not implemented. It should read 11 recommendations with 9 not implemented. So apologies for that. It does make a slight difference to the overall percentages, but if we work with the percentages that are in the report for the time being, Chairman, as long as you're happy, I'll provide all members with an updated set of slides and appendices with the accurate figures on after the meeting. So we identified 25 audit jobs, which included 284 audit recommendations, subject to the revision, which you will get sent through to you. 189 recommendations had been implemented, 67%, which is reassuring. 18% had not been implemented, which is not so good. 12% had been partially implemented or were ongoing, and 4% of the agreed audit recommendations, managers have subsequently got back to us and have accepted the risk and are not implementing the agreed action. That's something that we would be concerned about, and we will revisit and make if we are still concerned about that particular area, we would need to make the head of service aware of that particular issue. So it's probably easier if I refer members to the appendix. Appendix 1A identifies the internal audit opinions we use on individual jobs, as I mentioned earlier, but with a bit more of a description of what we mean by substantial, considerable, reasonable and limited. Appendix A2 identifies the risk, so 1, 2 or 3, which are now colour coded, so red, amber, green, so red, amber, orange, with greens being strengths. So that gives some description of why we felt those particular risks are higher than others. I've included Appendix A3 just for information, because those were previous audit opinions we've used, and some of the 14-15 reports do include those opinions. Moving on to Appendix B, there's some information there about what I've just talked about in graphical form. So on a pie chart, we can see clearly what's been implemented, what's not been implemented, given the overall number of recommendations that we made over those 2 financial years. Appendix C puts a bit more meat on the bone, identifies individual jobs, individual audits where we undertook a review, and the total number of recommendations which we made and were agreed is in the right hand column, and the grand total, and then the various columns then within the table show which recommendations have been implemented, not implemented or partially implemented on an individual basis. So members can see that across the board there, some areas have been very good at implementing the agreed recommendations, some have not been so good. The Appendix D split that in terms of the type of risks which we've identified. So the type of recommendations, whether it's a significant recommendation or less significant recommendation, and identified the level of implementation of those risks. Appendix E gives the same information but over a directorate basis. So there's quite a bit of information there, but hopefully there's enough detail there for you to understand where we're coming from, and the fact that we've tried to identify what recommendations have been implemented, what haven't, and we'll be working with operational managers in 17-18 to make sure that those that haven't been implemented, there's a justification as to why. But I'm happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Councillor Easton.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Yes, that 18 did jump out on the car parking. But going back to that car park income, there are now, I think you said 9 not implemented, which suggests to me that on Appendix B, your not implemented is less than 18% now, because 9 will come out of that. But more importantly, what is the concern, or do you have a concern about the inquiries you carried out on car park income and 9 not being implemented? What sort of implementation was needed, or is needed, or could be needed in the future to correct that and get that not implemented down to, say, 0, for example?
Okay, thanks, Chairman. Obviously, we did have a concern because we identified a weakness, and we had an agreed recommendation with the operational manager. When we have these discussions with operational managers, sometimes they say everything will be sorted once we implement a new system. Everything will be sorted once we've got our resources up to speed and we're fully resourced with our staffing establishment. In this particular issue with car parks, they were waiting for the car park policy to be implemented and updated across Monmouthshire, which has only recently been done, I believe, and as a result of that, they can now implement the recommendations. We will be going back and checking that those recommendations have been implemented in 17-18 and reporting back to you to see to give you a state of play in terms of progress. Or if you feel as though you want the car park manager to come in and discuss that with you as an audit committee, then the head of service is happy to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that might be appropriate on the basis that there's been a lot of talk of changes within car park operating procedures, so it wouldn't be a bad idea to have them here to talk to us. As if the Chair agrees.
Well, I'm just wondering whether we're clear on what the issues were. Have we been provided with sufficient information to be able to quiz the manager about it?
Yes, Chairman, in previous audit committees, because it was an unfavourable audit opinion, you'd have had some detail around why we felt it was unfavourable, but I can recirculate that to members. But this is more so about agreeing recommendations with the operational manager and then not implementing them. So they've agreed that they should implement the recommendations, but for some reason they haven't, and the head of service is quite happy to come along to a future audit committee to explain why, so we can put a bit more meat on the bone there if you would prefer.
So Councillor Easton has suggested that we hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Easton, absolutely. I think for ease of getting us into this, the operational manager knows what those problems were. He also knows what measures are being taken now that everything is in place. I think it's just initially a simple instruction. Come along and talk to us about the unfavourable reports, what you've done about it, and timescales, that sort of thing, and then we'll get a more complete picture. The one I'm a little bit more concerned about is with the children and young people. There's an awful lot in there. We do have a new chief officer now, and it may be an idea if perhaps at our next meeting Andrew can tell us if he's had the opportunity of talking to Will McLean about measures that he's taken there. I don't think it's fair to call him or any of his staff in at the moment because they're going through a lot of change. I think we just need to understand that they've got a grip on it at this stage anyway.
Yes, Chairman, I can certainly do that.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I've got the feeling of the committee on these items. I think it would be very useful for the committee to talk to the manager of the car parking. So unless I'm getting some hostility on that, I shall write to the person. Who is it, by the way?
Head of service is Roger Hoggins, head of
Roger
operations.
Hoggins. Right. And on the other item, you're going to let us know if you've been able to talk to Will McLean for the next meeting. Is that right?
Yes, Chairman, I'll sort that out, yeah.
Okay. Any other observations or questions on this paper? I was intrigued about the situation where a risk has been accepted by the manager without taking action to alleviate the risk. Does this ever happen because in practice it just cannot be done, that you can alleviate the risk, or perhaps only at excessive cost in terms of cash or resources? Do you have a view on that?
Thanks, Chairman. It varies. The reasons why the agreed recommendations have not been implemented varies. Sometimes it's because of convenience. Sometimes it's because of lack of resource, both on a financial or a physical sense. We need to follow that up better than we have done in the past, and identify where those managers have said that they're not implementing the recommendation. We need to chase that up, because if it's a significant weakness that we've identified and they're not filling the gap, then we need to raise that to the head of service level and put the challenge to the head of service to ask them why they haven't done that. We haven't done that yet, but we'll make sure we can do that in 17-18.
And no doubt you'd come to us as a committee if there were issues that couldn't be resolved.
Absolutely, Chairman, yeah.
Right, thank you very much. Councillor Easton.
Yeah, could I ask a further question on the statistics provided to us? For example, land vehicle control, I'll just pick that out of the hat. It says 9 implemented, and there were 9 in total. Are there any interim measures that were needed to get those implemented, which were needed to put in place?
Sorry, Jim, I didn't understand that.
Could you clarify the question,
Yeah.
please, Councillor?
You've got a list of those implemented. What was the process before they became implemented? How thorough was it? And hard to explain what I want to
Okay,
ask.
I'll try and explain our process. And
Yeah,
that
on
might
the
help,
process, that's
okay?
fine, yeah.
So we do an audit of the school against a pre-prepared programme of what we expect to be in place in terms of controls. We then test back to source documentation what is actually in place. So what processes are actually in place, what controls are actually in place, and we determine strengths and weakness on the basis of that. So if expected controls are in place, good, that's a strength. If expected controls are not in place, then that's a weakness. We then formulate what we call a draft report with an action plan in it. We then discuss that with the operational manager. So in this circumstance, we'll discuss the action plan with the head teacher and usually the school support officer, the school administrator, and go through that report to make sure we're factually correct. Because everything we do is based on evidence we've identified at the establishment or service where we've undertaken an audit. We then incorporate the manager's comments on that report, and then we add a recommendation, an audit recommendation to that report, and we get the operational manager to agree or disagree with the recommendations that we're making. If the report is unfavourable, we've given a commitment to Audit Committee in the past that we will go back to that particular school within a 6 to 12 month period and physically follow up to make sure that action plan has been addressed and the recommendations have been implemented. So we're giving the manager on site an opportunity to address the concerns we raised. If we go back and nothing has been implemented, we then report that back to Audit Committee to say that there are 2 consecutive unfavourable audit opinions. Do you think you should be calling in that particular operational manager? And you've done so in the past. And there's we've got some examples in terms of the minutes of that. So the basis of implementing those recommendations is the action plan, which the operational manager agrees to and gives us assurance that they will implement those recommendations. When we do this exercise and we follow up the implementation of recommendations, we are reliant on the operational manager getting back to us and being honest and saying, yes, I have implemented those recommendations. We will test some of those establishments on a sample basis. So those operational managers don't know if they're going to be sampled, but we could go back and look at that particular school and check that one in particular. And then we would report back through the quarterly updates to you as an audit committee. So hopefully that's answered your question.
Thank you. You answered the question far better than I framed it.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Wathen. Okay, I'll then move on to the next item on the agenda. Previous item was about the implementation of Audit Committee of the recommendations. This one's about a progress report on unfavourable audit opinions. So over to you again, Mr. Wathen.
Thank you, Chairman. So I've given members an overview of what we do in terms of auditing, the opinions we've arrived at, and we've already talked about unfavourable audit opinions. This is the 6-monthly update report on progress of implementation of recommendations for unfavourable audit opinions, so at an operational level. So there's some background in terms of the number of unfavourable audit opinions we've issued in the last couple of financial years, but then going on to paragraph 4.5, 2014-15, we issued 6 audit reports with an unsatisfactory audit opinion, which was equivalent to unfavourable ones, limited at the moment, and those are listed below. Then we moved to 4.6. In 2015-16, we issued 7 audit reports which were unsatisfactory. And the table within 4.6 gives an update of the 14-15 reviews and 15-16 reviews in terms of what the follow-up action was. So the revised opinion column states that either that audit is currently in progress, so we're in the process of following up at the moment, which kind of overlap the financial years. There's a revised audit opinion, so Mega Primary has gone from unsatisfactory to reasonable, and we issue that at the end of the financial year. And where we haven't quite started that work yet, the note will be to be followed up in 17-18. So that gives an update to those particular reviews that we've previously issued an unfavourable audit opinion to. And I'll be reporting back to Audit Committee in terms of progress on a 6-monthly basis where we are in terms of those particular 15-16 reviews. Some of them have been previously called into Audit Committee, for example, Chepstow School, Passenger Transport Unit, have come into Audit Committee to justify why the reasons behind the unfavourable audit opinion and given assurances to members that things would improve moving forward. The audit team hasn't gone back out to actually check that yet, but we're in the process of doing that. So with regards to 16-17 audits, we issued, that should be 7 reports with a limited opinion. We changed our opinion definition in 16-17, so it now becomes a limited opinion. And some were in draft at the year end, and some were actually finalised. So if it's got final in the brackets afterwards, that means it's finalised. We've agreed the draft report with the operational manager, and it's their responsibility for implementing the agreed recommendations. So there's a list there of the 7 audits which we felt were limited in terms of our audit opinion. You note that events is finalised, and we are in the progress of following that up at the moment, which picks up the point that the chairman made earlier on. Again, we'll be reporting back to Audit Committee that particular updated audit opinion once we've completed our work. So to put a bit more meat on the bone, I've listed the individual reviews in 4.11, and school meals, that's previously been reported to Audit Committee. Escalifin Primary School, these are the main issues why we felt it was unsatisfactory. So there are 3 bullet points there. Basically, their income collection procedures were not as good as they should have been. And there's a bit of detail around that. Item C is the events audit which we've looked at. This is kind of jumped ahead of itself really, because we've discussed the issues at a previous audit committee based on my quarterly updates, because it was identified as a limited assurance opinion and members asked various questions, so we gave them more information about why I felt it was unsatisfactory. Those are listed in those bullet points, and we're working with the operational manager at the moment to make sure those issues are addressed, because as Councillor Murphy mentioned, we've got some significant contracts, events going ahead in the summer. We haven't completed our work yet, so we're still requesting some information from that particular operational manager. Item D, HR policy review. Again, we felt that was limited assurance and outlined the reasons why. These are the significant issues why we felt it was a limited assurance. There are other issues and there were strengths to those reports as well, but these are the reasons why we felt they were a limited assurance. Moving on to external placements. This is how we looked after children and the way we deal with children in care who are placed outside of the authority. Again, we felt that there were some concerns there in terms of using off-framework providers, individual contracts not being as up-to-date as they should be, contract management not fully deployed or developed, and the system itself showed that there were some overdue cases. The last but one review, limited assurance, was compliance with the Bribery Act. So this identified that new members of staff were not receiving appropriate corporate induction to incorporate an update on the Bribery Act. There was no designated officer within the authority for total responsibility for compliance with the Bribery Act 2010. The Anti-Fraud and Corruption Strategy Policy Statement had not been reviewed or updated for some time, and employees were not made aware that bribery is actually a criminal offence and the repercussions of any criminal prosecutions. The authority had not performed risk assessments to ascertain the likelihood or impact of potential bribery. Limited information was in place for employees to disclose any issues or raise concerns, especially in terms of conflicts of interest and receipts of gifts and hospitality. And that links to the employee code of conduct question, which was raised previously, which I said I will send through to members after this meeting. And there's no authorised signatory list for procurement decisions, and contracts were being agreed that were sometimes non-compliant with our contract procedure rules. So there were some significant concerns there. In relation to that, I can give members a bit of an update that we have revised the anti-fraud, bribery and corruption strategy, which came through to Audit Committee last time and is going through to Cabinet for approval in June. We have determined a designated chief officer for overall responsibility for bribery. and other things are in situ in terms of making improvements to move that forward. The last item we identified as having...
Just at that point, I think Councillor Higginson had a comment to make, which I think if it's relevant to what
Yes, thank you,
just
Chairman.
reported.
In relation to compliance with the Bribery Act, what moves have been made to counteract all these? Because some of these are there's considerable concern, if I put it that way. And, no authorised signatory, to the last bullet point, no authorised signatory list was maintained for procurement decisions. If you go back a while, we had this with passenger transport, and we had some explanations. But I think we need explanations as to why this is happening with this particular situation.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, as I said, we've updated the anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy. Within that, there's a commitment to provide training and improve awareness for that amongst employees and members. So that's ongoing and will be picked up in 2017-18. And the other issues, we'll need to work with other officers within the council to make sure that we make these improvements going forward. And then because it's limited assurance, my audit team will follow that up and report back in terms of progress, how well these concerns have been addressed.
How soon will that be, please?
Right. Just
I think I can help there, Chair, because I've already done it. And so if I send this response over to Wendy, she can send it round. But it's from the procurement unit, Scott James, and he deals with compliance with the Bribery Act and the next item, which is mobile phones. So if he's taken the questions and he's given answers. So if I forward that to Wendy now, perhaps we can send it round.
June, just to answer the member's question, that report was still in draft at the end of the financial year. So we're in the process of finalising that at the moment. We're receiving comments from various officers around the authority. Once that is finalised, we will then have 6 to 12 months to report back to Audit Committee. It depends on how soon they can implement the recommendations, but I can report back to Audit Committee by December if members are happy with that.
Seems so, and we've got some information that's going to be distributed to the committee from the Secretary. Yep. Yes, Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't want to stop Mr Waltham in full flow, but I needed to get a personal interest in 411B Escollyfin Primary School, where I'm a LE appointed governor.
Thank you. Do you wish to continue, Mr Waltham?
Thanks, Sharon. Last one is mobile phones. Again, limited assurance since 16-17 for a number of reasons. Lack of evidence of approval for the contract. We couldn't find a signed copy of the contract. We believe the contract had expired, so there was an issue about the new contract. There was a tech fund available to the council, which had not been suitably utilised. Some phones were being paid for but hadn't had a current user against them. There were issues around high costs of mobile phones and not taking any action to address that. And the mobile phone policy needed to be updated to make sure that there was no misuse of the phones, and if there was, then that could possibly lead to disciplinary process in the council's procedures. So ultimately, when we issue these audit reports, we're given assurance to Audit Committee and to senior managers that processes are in place or should be in place, and if they're not in place, we're recommending or making recommendations to make those improvements. So the operational managers and the heads of service have got their own responsibility for addressing those weaknesses we've identified, implementing the agreed recommendations, and when we come back and we follow up and we do a second review, we will make sure that we will report back on the progress, whether that's good or bad, and report back to Audit Committee accordingly, Chairman. Happy to take any further questions.
Any questions or observations? Councillor Strong?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of things, Andrew. On the previous report, item 3.6, you say, due to limited resources within the internal audit team, not all audit recommendations could be physically followed up. And then in 4.9 of this report, you say ideally these audit reviews will be followed up by the audit team within 9 to 12 months. It was just really a question of your staffing levels, whether you're up to maximum as far as finance is concerned, or whether you might be short, or possibly whether the finance team could possibly find a bit of money for you to increase your team.
Mr Wathen.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks, Councillor. In terms of the comments in the report, the first report relates to all reports we've issued, regardless of the opinion. The second report relates to just unfavourable audits, so audit opinions. So we'll give a commitment that we'll follow up unfavourable audit opinions physically, and we'll go out and we'll redo an audit in those respects. For the other opinions, where they're not so bad, then we've got to rely on information coming back through from operational managers. I think is your first point. Your second point, we have an establishment of 5 in our team, plus me, and we're fully staffed at the moment. But as I keep saying to anybody that listens, if we have more auditors, then we can give you more assurances. But obviously we need to work within the finances we have within the authority, and that's why we do a risk assessment in terms of our plan. But yeah, ideally if we had a bigger team we could give you more assurances.
But we're getting information about how the process is being carried out, and I think I would be correct in concluding that so far as unsatisfactory or limited opinions from 16-17 are concerned, they are all going to be followed up.
That's right, Chairman.
Probably
yes.
in the next year.
That's right. In this current financial year, yes.
And just one personal a question from me, really. Is there anything from further back, say from 2015-16, that the committee could usefully look into?
Chairman, we're still in the process of following up some of that work, so it might be more opportune to have that discussion when we report back in the next 6 months.
That's fine with me, but I just thought I'd see if we needed to get the ball rolling on anything. Right, thank you. Any more questions or observations on the paper? No, then I'll thank Mr Wathen for that useful paper. The next item on the agenda is our report on our discussions about 0 hours contracts, which we had last year. We had quite a wide-ranging discussion, which was minuted, but it was suggested that we needed to make a formal report to the council, since they had asked us to look into this issue. So I'm submitting the report at agenda item 13 for the committee's consideration. As you'll see, I considered the main findings to be that the County Council should note that the Audit Committee is satisfied that Monmouthshire County Council does not use 0 hours contracts for anyone it employs, according to the definition, a flexible contract where an employer does not guarantee set hours of work for an employee, but the employee is contracted to that employer and cannot work for another employer. The next finding, that Monmouthshire County Council does employ casual workers who are not obliged to do any work for the authority if they choose not to. It is accepted that this is helpful both to the authority when organising work patterns and suits many of the casual workers who have other commitments or do not wish to be committed to fixed hours. It's recommended that the use of casual employment should continue to be monitored. Managers and service areas should take ownership of this for their own areas. The human resources business partnering approach will help, making use of annual information on the use of casual employment. Where appropriate, Monmouthshire County Council should continue to offer casual employees employment contracts equivalent to those offered to permanent employees if the work has become a regular commitment, for example. We've been told that, that's the policy, it should be the policy, and that's what we're recommending should continue. And in the report, I mentioned that employment practices of employment agencies could cause a risk to the reputation of the authority if that agency were found to be using certain employment practices. So I feel that the authority should keep an eye on that. Now, before I open the discussion to members, I would invite anyone here from People Services if they have any comments on the draft as it is. Sally Thomas, perhaps.
Hi, Sally Thomas here from HR. I've got no comments, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Thank you very much. Questions or observations? I think Councillor Easton got his hand up first.
Thank you again, Chair. Yes, this number of jobs was whittled down to 216 on the basis of some jobs taken out of the equation because of their specific duties. But I'd like to take to 4.5 of the report. The committee was informed that the council uses specific contracts that are either temporary or permanent for a set number of part-time or full-time hours, etc., etc., etc. I'd like to know from Sally, if it's possible, to get the information regarding other areas within the authority, for example, within the museum service, that's Abergavenny Museum, Cheps Museum, Monmouth Museum, Shire Hall, Tinton Station and Caldecott Castle, on the specific requirements of staff in those 6 establishments in terms of flexibility of work, contract annual or partially annual contracts. I just wonder if Sally could provide more detail on those particular specific establishments in terms of their requirement to work, because they are flexible, they are part-time, they are seasonal, and could you differentiate the whole lot in how that fits in with our question on zero-hour contracts? Although I appreciate they may not be zero-hour contracts, but there may be elements within their contracts which could give that impression.
I'm sure.
Thank you for the question. I'm happy to provide further detailed information on staff employed in the museum service, if that will help. No problem at all.
If you're happy to provide it and a member of the committee has asked for more information, that's fine with me. I will just remind committee members that what we're trying to do now is report on the discussion we had in the past on 0 hours contracts. Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just to give some benefit to, or some information to the new members, it was under 2.4 where it said if it becomes regular effectively, it would be regularised. In fact, that did happen a couple of months ago, where a regular pattern started to emerge, and the status of those employees was changed. So it isn't just, yeah, we do that and we don't do anything about it. Yes, we do, and it happens.
Well, I think one of the useful things about this type of report is that we've now got it clarified what the policy should be, and so that the people are on firm ground if they want to query what's going on. Well, if the committee is in agreement, then I will ask the clerk to the committee to pass the paper on to the full council. And again, let me know when it's coming up, and I shall attend. Right, thank you very much, everybody. Well, I think the next item on the agenda then is the forward work programme. The new members will see many of the regular reports that we receive. It's always very useful to have this a fairly long-range look into the future to see what's likely to come up on the agenda. I note that the annual government statements must have been deferred. We haven't been considering that today. Has anyone got any questions or observations on the forward work plan as it stands? No, I don't think so. Yes,
Yeah, sorry.
Councillor
Do we need,
Feekins.
do we need to accommodate the Wellbeing Act moving forward?
Wellbeing Act. What's other issues for us there?
I think it was one of the issues that the external auditor picked up in his introduction, that they need to be looking at that. I'm not sure that we've got it in our work programme going forward for this current financial year, but if you wanted the performance team, which they do come to Audit Committee regularly to provide Audit Committee with information about our risk management arrangements and performance arrangements, I'm sure they'd be able to come and give you an update on what we're doing around the wellbeing assessments.
Do we want to see a report on that?
Could I ask just one further question then,
Yep.
if I may? Is it possible to ask Mr. Lewis when the WAO will start because it's under their remit, when they'll start looking at the Wellbeing Act and assessment to see how we as an authority are implementing the audit over that?
Yeah, Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think our work has already started. It's all ongoing. We'll pick up any issues. We gather intelligence as we're completing work during the course of this audit. As I explained, there's not a requirement on us to report back specifically to the council on this, but every 5 years, the Auditor General will produce a report that he will present before the Assembly in general as to how the Act is being implemented across all the public bodies that it applies to. So part of that will be the intelligence that we gather from here. But during the course of our audit going forward, I don't think there's any proposal at the moment to bring back a report that sort of benchmarks where you are. We would just be sort of keeping a watching brief on what's going on, because the responsibility is on the council itself to implement the requirements of the Act.
Well, I have very little, absolutely no personal information about the Wellbeing Act. But if it would be useful for somebody to perhaps make a report to this committee about what the implications are for MCC, then I'd be happy to take it on a future agenda. Okay, the date of the next meeting will be the 6th of July at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So thank you very much, everybody, and thanks for coming.
Thank you, Chair.